So this next module is about individual neurodivergent profiles.
Yes, that's right. We thought it would be helpful to discuss the 3 profiles that you'll most likely see in a classroom or workplace, which are autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. You might often see that they overlap or co-occur, and you might have heard of AuDHD, which is when autism and ADHD overlap.
Yes, I've heard of that, but I'm not entirely sure how it shows up in an individual.
So the best way that it was described to me was like it's having 2 warring siblings in your head, and they're both pulling and pushing in opposite directions. So the autistic traits will crave that routine, depth, and structure, and the ADHD is seeking the change, the novelty, the stimulation. It's exhausting to have that kind of constant battle in your head.
And yet we're often judging what we can see on the outside of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a neurodivergent person, there's so much going on internally. You might have a student whose emotions throughout the day will be on a roller coaster, and they might be incredibly energetic 1 minute, then paralysed the next, or they're hyper-focused on a task and then don't want to know. You just have to be aware of that real dysregulation or the imbalance that they can experience. I know that from a teaching or management perspective, that's going to be particularly challenging, but just imagine that you're that person or a child and all of that's going on in your brain and body and you don't really know why. It's going to be quite scary for them. And this is why at Neurominds we're so passionate that people are aware of what's happening in their brain and body so that they can recognise it and then manage it. That's what we talk about predominantly in this module.
It must be really hard for them, especially in children. So it's not just about their attention or behaviour, it's about how their brain and body work together.
Absolutely. You might have heard of the term neurocomplexity. So that's the brain and the body interaction. I think what's emerging now is that there's a lot of evidence that when the brain struggles to regulate, as it does across most of the neurodivergent profiles, we often see that with a physical response. So they might get things like gut issues, migraines, chronic fatigue, those kind of conditions showing up.
I had no idea, and I don't think it's talked about enough. What I'm understanding is that people might be in pain or drained, and we just see them as zoning out when in fact they're managing this physical need.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I think it's, if you're completely unaware of that, what you misread is that the behaviour's laziness or defiance, and in fact they're managing real distress. If you then add in something like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, so RSD, that can result in almost like a full brain and body shutdown.
RSD, I have heard of that, but I'm not entirely sure what it is or what it means.
So it's often described as one of the most debilitating traits associated specifically with ADHD, but it does go across all profiles. And it's a real intense emotional sensitivity to either a perceived rejection or criticism or an actual criticism. And it's not that the individual's being oversensitive, it's not overreaction. RSD actually triggers parts of the brain that are associated with threat and emotion. It's about not feeling safe. Our brain doesn't clearly differentiate between emotional and physical pain, so they can have a criticism and then feel tightness in their chest or stomach cramps or get a headache. It's a real physical feeling, like a punch in the gut. And it's actually that neurological response, which for many neurodivergent people, as I've said, especially those with ADHD, it can utterly derail them. So it's quite important that you understand it as managers and teachers, and they understand what's happening.
Just hearing that makes me think that within our schools, you've got these individuals growing up, and that must be incredibly hard for them to deal with.
Yes, yeah. I mean, on a daily basis, they're facing constant social and academic situations where they might feel judged or not valued, and so each part of their day could potentially lead to rejection sensitivity and then that total shutdown.
Okay, so how can we help them with this?
It's about trying to offer feedback privately, not kind of blaring it out in the middle of a classroom or the office. Just doing it really gently and in a positive way. We do describe other strategies in the rest of the module in much more detail.
I wanted to ask you about the term masking, which I've been hearing quite a lot lately. Is it when people hide their struggles from others?
Yes, exactly. It's most commonly seen in girls, but we can see it in boys too. But it's also more predominant in those with inattentive ADHD, but it's seen across all the neurodivergent profiles. And that person might seem particularly quiet, detached, withdrawn, and sort of gone inside themselves. But actually, in their head, their thoughts are racing. The thing is, masking really, really takes its toll. So it's exhausting and can eventually lead to anxiety, burnout, and that real loss of identity, because it's almost as if the person is pretending to be someone that they're not whilst putting on that mask.
That's very interesting because I have noticed some people who seem absolutely fine 1 minute and then it's almost out of nowhere. They're just suddenly not.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost like that 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. And some of that's about the build-up. So there's years and years of absorbing the message that they're wrong, the way they're thinking is wrong, or that they're broken. And often that leads to a kind of guilt or shame. But it's also linked to that dysregulation that we've talked about previously, particularly the emotional dysregulation and that constant people-pleasing, emotional suppression, withdrawal, masking. That's all just building up and then it almost explodes.
So, what I'm understanding is we're not just supporting a behaviour here, we're actually supporting the individual's identity.
Exactly. When a person understands their condition more, they can let go of some of those maladaptive coping mechanisms that they've used previously. So things like the masking, the avoidance, the hypervigilance, the self-criticism, that internal dialogue that's so self-deprecating. And once they can let go of that, they can then uncover their authentic self.
Right, so let me just clarify that. It's not actually about fixing the person.
No, exactly. If you think back to the social model that we looked at previously, we considered removing the barriers rather than fixing the person. And that's really the consistent message that we're trying to get across in the training. In the next section, we're going to look at each of those profiles in much more detail.